Welcome, everyone, to Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Church Adult Faith Development Program. We are really excited to have you here with us today. If you're here for Earth Stewards, you are in the right place. We really appreciate having Mary Tyrtle Rooker and Eric Eldritch instruct us and share their wisdom with us. If you're interested in any of our other classes, we have the full spring schedule available online. You can see that link there. If for some reason you need that link, again, just email me. I'm happy to share it with you. Also, we want to extend the invitation to have you visit us on Sundays. So we have worship services every Sunday at 10 a.m. at Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Church. It's by Zoom. So if you would like the link, you can find that link on our Facebook page. We post it every Sunday morning before 10 o'clock. If for some reason you're not able to find that link or you don't have a Facebook account, just email me directly and I'm happy to share that with you. And also, before we go even any further, I do want to just name that today we had a guilty on all charges verdict in the George Floyd case. And that's just amazing and something that's so worth celebrating. But it is a battle won, but the war is still ongoing. And so worth to celebrate, but just know that there's still so much to do. But just, I have no words for the joy of that verdict and the lives that will not be lost because we're not out protesting and people getting hurt. And so I just want to name that because I know if you haven't heard that verdict already. And now I invite Eldritch to light the chalice.
Earth, my body, water, my blood, air, my breath, and fire, my spirit. Earth, my body, water, my blood, air, my breath, and fire, my spirit. Earth, my body, water, my blood, air, my breath, and fire, my spirit. Blessed be. We recognize the light of the chalice. We recognize the land that Paint Branch is built upon, the ancestral and current home of the Piscataway. And we honor all beings in our community and across the planet. Blessed be. Mary? Mary, could you hit the mute button?
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So I too have a chant to share. This is one that is about really my long journey of Earth Days since 1970. It's about my long journey of how to learning how to honor the earth. You know, this amazing biosphere that gives us life, our beautiful, rare, precious blue boat home that I have behind me, by the way. And it's been a long unfolding process of kind of what I think of as finding my way back home. And it's also a part of what Joanna Macy has called the great turning. Can we have this great awakening to our true and rightful place among all the other kin that we share this blue boat home with? So I hope this chant supports you as it does me. Finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. Finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. Oh, river, I hear you, feel you calling me. Oh, river, who will I be when I reach the sea? Great turning, I hear you, feel you calling me. Great turning, who is the change that I need to be? Finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. Yes, I am finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. Please join me finding my way, finding my way, finding our way, finding our way, finding our way, finding our way back home. Yes, we are finding our way, 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 finding our way back home. Just finding our way back home. Thank you, Rattle. And thank you, Carisha and Mamuse, for that beautiful chant. So I think of myself as a bit of a visionary and a change agent who loves to sing and dance and drum. And my vision often pushes the edges of mainstream consciousness and consensus reality, as those of you who know me very well, or for more than 15 minutes, can probably have already figured out. I embrace the call by Joanna Macy and others to move into and with the great turning, which calls for us humans to take our proper place as a small part of the rest of nature. And I've engaged core shamanism since the early 1990s. I've had a shamanic healing practice since 2001, and I've been training shamanic healers since 2007. And Eldritch, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, I'll be glad to do so. As I said, I'm Eldritch, a member of Paint Branch, kind of a new UU person, but I've known Paint Branch for 20 some years. And one day I was out in the woods at a festival called Free Spirit Gathering, and I looked across a fire and I saw Mary, what are you doing here? And she said, Eric, what are you doing here? And that was at the beginning of my pagan path, and when I was leaving the faith that I was brought up in and found my space and place in nature. And it was there that I realized that I needed to search for more. And as a queer man, I found my salvation in the Radical Fairies, a wonderful group of very bohemian gay men that have lifted my spirits and have brought me magic and presence in life and an understanding of the magic inside of each and every one of us and the magic that we all have in the world around us. I'm also a priestess of Stone Circle Wicca USA. It's a very welcoming Wiccan tradition. And my greetings to friends of mine here who are from Stone Circle Wicca. I'm also ordained as a pagan clergy with Circle Sanctuary near Madison, Wisconsin. And Reverend Selena Fox, the senior minister, was a part of the very beginning of Earth Day and helped push that movement so many years ago. And so I have found that my life has come full circle to be in the full circle of wonderful people and in the full circle of what we used to call the big blue marble, if you remember, if you watch the same kids shows that I did growing up. And so my love for the planet is here in all of the spiritualities and all of the interfaith work that I do. So I'm really glad to be here tonight. I'm glad, Mary, that we're connected over all these years. So for tonight, Mary and I have been looking through a lot of material. And if you know anything about Mary, she is very thorough. in researching and finding materials. And so we have a wonderful handout that we'll send to you later. And in pouring through these links and articles, Mary and I had a lot of fun discussing what we could open with tonight. So we're going to have a conversation, we're going to watch a video, and then open a discussion. And so, Mary, in the material that we looked at in coming into this session, I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about, I'm going to make sure I find my place here, about what is Earth Day, because I remember in the 70s, all I knew as a kid growing up near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was Woodsy the Owl saying, "Give a hoot, don't pollute, reduce, reuse, recycle, reduce, reuse, recycle." And that was my introduction to Earth Day so long ago. Mary?
Well, when I first heard of Earth Day in, I think, 1970, it meant learning to recycle.
Mhm.
And it has grown over the decades to something completely different. And now on recycling, it means actually recycling as little as possible because I'm buying in bulk from my own containers instead of packaged items. And it means having as little trash as possible. And it's also questioning absolutely everything. Do I really need shampoo? It turns out I don't. I used to have very oily hair. I'd have to shampoo every 3 days, and I had to use all this conditioner, and I used all these organic and natural shampoos and so on. And I've weaned my hair off of them, and all I need to wash my hair now is water, every 3 weeks, and it looks better than ever. And it's also, questioning really everything I do. Do I need all this stuff, all this clutter? No, it only weighs me down. Do I need a leaf blower? Nope, leave the leaves. So it's a completely transformed view of what it means to be a human being and what it means to live sustainably. And it isn't how do we stay within 1.5 or 2 degrees. It isn't how do we keep our lifestyles, but make them less harmful. It's how do we live so that all beings, human and more than human, can survive and thrive. It's about learning to share the planet and not diminish the chances for future generations.
Mary, one of the things that I loved about Earth Day a long time ago, and I don't see people using it, is that green and yellow and white ecology flag. And I did some research into the graphic design behind that, and that was really wonderful to see that part of the movement where people were flying banners and marching and connecting that way. And that ecology movement was so much a part of my teens and my 20s. But I was wondering, in the material that we talked about, we found a conversation about deep ecology. And I think that's just seems to be so much more profound than waving a flag. Could you talk to us a little bit about deep ecology?
Sure. So deep ecology is radically different from mainstream environmentalism in several key ways, and I'll just enumerate them. Deep ecology, like pagan and shamanic worldviews, sees all beings as relatives, not resources. And this applies whether they're a river, a tree, or an other animal. It doesn't matter. Each is a sovereign being and has value in and of themselves. So each river, tree, animal has a right to exist and thrive without human interference. Each river, tree, animal has a right to habitat and to fulfill their place in the ecosystems in which they live. And I'll give you just a quick example of this. There's a rights of nature movement. Don't worry, there's plenty of info on that in the PDF you'll be getting. But rights of nature is encouraging groups and tribes to sign treaties for the rights of a river near them or the land. And the Shoshone-Bannock tribes joined 221 other tribes here on this continent in signing a treaty establishing grizzly bear rights. And one of the signers said, "The grizzly bear is sacred." And this is a direct quote. "The grizzly needs more habitat. And so let's give him some." Most of us don't think of grizzly bears, "Hey, let's bring in the grizzly bears, give them more habitat." Most of us are like, "Ah!" So it's really a very different way of sharing the planet that's real and meaningful. Does that help?
That does. That does. Deep ecology sounds like something that I can, well, think about, and the materials that we've amassed, or I should say, you've amassed, are really wonderful to help with that. Another term that I saw in our discussion was, and I love multisyllabic words, but confronting anthropomorphism. Confronting anthropomorphism. Could you talk to us about that?
Sure. It is very multisyllabic. Right up there with supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. But anthropomorphism really just means putting humans at the center of the universe, and placing human desires above all others. Humans get to override the needs of all other beings, those rivers, trees, other animals. And so confronting anthropomorphism, confronting that worldview that puts humans at the center, and really disregards everybody else, means accepting that, for one, humans have no right to reduce others' access to habitat. That grizzly bear has the right to habitat just as much as we do. And instead of trying to make human dominion sustainable, human dominance sustainable, we need to embrace limitations that allow us and all life to fit in. And another way of thinking of anthropomorphism is it's a human supremacy. And part of confronting it means we need to accept limits and challenge human expansionism into grizzly bear territory, for example. And if the interdependent web of existence is not thriving because of our activities and lifestyle, then our activities and lifestyles are not part of our sacred design. We've broken our compact with the great interdependent web of existence, of which we are all a part, that us UUs love to talk about. So as long as we view our plant and animal and elemental kin as resources instead of relatives, the biosphere will not thrive, and we will not be living in right relationship with that web. And one final thought, we think we know what it means to be human, but we don't. All we know is how humans behave when we plug them into a power over anti-nature paradigm like the dominant one. But we would behave in a completely different way if we plugged us into a different paradigm.
I really like that idea of the interdependent web of existence. That's something I want to think more about and to embrace more, because so many of our pagan chants and things talk about our connection with the earth, and also the plants and animals and all that are in Earth's household. And it's so important for us to understand interdependence. And if not, we're not going to exist. I'm worried about that.
Me too. I suspect we're not alone in the room.
I think that's true. Let's talk a little bit about stewardship, because I've heard this term also used, and the title of tonight is about Earth stewards. How does that connect with deep ecology?
That's a good question. I think most Unitarian Universalists think of ourselves as Earth stewards. I think it's a term I've heard used, and we often think it's the ultimate in being a good earthling, a good human. But Earth stewardship is still that humans know best, or at least can run the planet, managing Earth's resources for the good of all. For the good of all, and that we can do this just as well as nature can. So Earth stewardship still places humans and human needs at the center of the universe. Um, and some would have said that being an Earth steward means we think we've gotten good at being God. Um, and when we speak of natural resources or sustaining ecosystem services or the environment and stewardship, which a lot of mainstream environmentalist groups do, what we're saying is that human appropriation and enslavement of the world is normal and fine, as long as it's done well and humanely.
Mm.
So, stewards do this also. They perceive the other animals and plants and the rivers and mountains and the air as natural resources. And deep ecology and shamanism say, no, they aren't resources, they're relatives. They're our kin, our fellow earthlings. And we aren't their stewards, we're their siblings.
Mm.
We're not their stewards, we're their siblings.
What a great shift of mindset to
Yeah.
consider all beings in Earth's household. That's great. I want to jump ahead in our outline just for a second to talk about that we're not alone in doing this. Unitarian Universalists, there are environmentalist groups out there. There are so many people doing this work across the world. And in the field of science, this is in the handout that we'll provide. The concept of the study of biomimicry. And that was a new to me concept, but looking first to nature, rather than trying to design something that flies, why don't you look at things that fly and learn from them? And so putting the planet and our siblings at the forefront and letting them teach us. And the UUA principle of all beings has been important to me to learn about, really considering that we're all sentient beings. Even the rocks that we think of as not having knowledge do have knowledge, and they do have wisdom. And that across the globe, we are not alone in this work. There is a group called the Parliament of the World's Religions that is taking a stand for eco-justice across the planet. And so if you ever feel that you're just doing your thing in your community, know that people across the world are taking a stand for the planet. And we put some links in there about the Parliament of the World's Religions. I know that sometimes regionally, we actually take an action. And one of the actions, Mary, was the example that you had talked about water protectors at Standing Rock. Could you talk about that for a minute? Hit your mute button again.
Sorry, I got it. Some people think when they hear about the Lakota Standing Rock water protectors who are fighting off the pipeline, they think, oh, they're Earth stewards. That's what we're doing. But actually, there's some differences, and I just want to quickly itemize them. Just because a person or any other animal defends its food or territory doesn't mean it's in charge of managing that land and dictating the landscape. So water protectors are more siblings, not stewards. They see the water as a relative, not a resource, and they're defending the water to maintain it, to protect it from exploitation, including human exploitation, their own as well, and from pollution. So they're not self-appointed overseers seeking to manage the water. They're defending the water's right to exist on its own terms. They're not seeking to displace the water, but to allow it to continue and to thrive on the water's terms. And they're challenging human expansionism into the waters.
So the river is a living being that has rights. And
who has rights?
Oh, yes.
It's a river the river is a living being who has rights.
That's a really important, very simple turn of phrase that's really meaningful. The river who has rights. Very cool. Well, we've tried to divide our time tonight into thirds. So if you would you take a little stretch break here for a second and put your hand on your heart and maybe tap your heart and get your blood flowing a second, find your own little rhythm just for a minute and connect. And while we're doing this, Mary is going to tee up not a TED talk, but a Fred talk. And I found this this talk really interesting. So, Mary? And I think you need to click it so that it's full screen.
Yep.
One syllable, maybe. I feel a little hesitant to be even mildly critical of my hero, Jerry Mander, but I think he's left the hall, so I can be curmudgeonly.
Who's here?
Oh dear. Well, I confess to being a little bit skeptical about techno-utopianism and the fate of the earth. That's a mouthful. That's techno-utopianism gets you 8 syllables even before you get to the fate of the earth. And it seemed to me like a brilliant ad guy like Jerry might have come up with something a little punchy, a little more pithy, maybe even an acronym, 1 syllable, maybe in the form of a man's name, something like Ted. That one's taken, I guess, but given we heard Richard Heinberg's talk and in anticipation of John Michael Greer's, you probably want to be sort of vaguely apocalyptic. So I propose, humbly, that maybe this event should have been the Fred Talks. No, you haven't even heard. You haven't even heard the acronym, and that stands for Facing the Reality of Extinction and Doom. These would be apocalyptic ideas worth dreading. We didn't plan it, but apparently my talk actually is Eileen Christ's talk, but knowing that I would need help, I would need pretty pictures. Mine's in the form of an illustrated bedtime story for adults. And like any grand narrative that is either portentous or even pretentious, it begins with those great 3 words, in the beginning. In the beginning, the world was whole and beauty prevailed. Life begetting life until the waters, then the lands were filled with creatures. Myriad were their languages, from the vaguely imperceptible song of moss to the bugling of elk. Whales performed their symphonies in the deep. The sounds of life were everywhere. Life pulsed and contracted and flourished through the ages. After innumerable epochs had passed, a creature appeared, who learned to speak and count. For millennia he lived well among his wild kin. But as his cleverness grew, so did his ambitions, until the day he declared himself ruler of all. Believing the self-deception that his kind was sovereign over the others, he taught his children that the earth had been made for man's use and profit. He no longer recognized his neighbors in the community of life, instead calling them natural resources. His work he named progress. The old religions, which had long tied the human tribe to the other creatures in a circle of reciprocity, were forgotten. Feigning himself Lord Man, he grew ever more clever. He learned to gather and burn fossil fuels made by ancient geological forces. Praise was sung incessantly to the new god, growth. His numbers became multitudes. As the multitudes spread across the face of the earth, the songs of the other creatures grew fewer and fainter. Many voices went permanently quiet, replaced by the sounds of machines, digging, churning, scarring the land, and driving the whales crazy with the noise. Every day, the earth grew poorer, transformed bit by Lord Man's numbers and actions. The seas were emptied of fish and filled with garbage. The trees were replaced by bleeding stumps. The prairies were transformed into feeding factories for the ever-expanding human masses. Smokestacks darkened the skies. No place was sacred. no landscape safe from the insatiable creature's thirst for more energy to serve his god of growth. Lord Man tamed rivers, split atoms, decapitated mountains, and stabbed the earth everywhere he thought a vein of fuel lay hidden. When the feverish earth cried out, sending furies to communicate her distress, Lord Man denied her sickness until it no longer could be denied. Slowly, the scales began to fall from his eyes when he saw famine ravage the land, when he saw precious sources of fresh water disappear, when the longing that gnawed on his spirit made him recall so many creatures that had passed into oblivion. Seeing the effects of his hubris, he began to wonder if his empire was secure. His delusion weakened just enough to reveal the choice before him. Two paths. One, leading to an abundant earth filled with birdsong. The other, the way of growth, offered riches for some, misery for many, and ultimate destruction for all his tribe. Would he restrain his numbers and rejoin the community of life as plain member and citizen, or attempt to engineer all the earth to his will, heeding only the call of more? That's my parable for how we got to this moment, into the so-called Anthropocene, the age of human dominion. And now we're enveloped in the technosphere, this world of human-created artifacts and techniques, a hyper-complex interconnected system of exploitative processes running on this one-time windfall of cheap fossil energy. But as normal as this may seem to us in a place like this, in a grand city like this, in this particular moment, it is, of course, a very, very new phenomenon in human history. For the vast, vast majority of our history as a species, humans were embedded not in the technosphere, but in the biosphere, embedded in the fabric of life that conceived us. We had emerged from this boundless creativity of wild nature that also birthed the trilobites, and then later the dinosaurs, and then much later other large mammals like us, the grizzlies and the gorillas. And if this is our deepest human experience, if this is our fundamental history, to be members of the biotic community, and not self-appointed overseers of the planetary plantation, then how did we go so wrong? Now, that is beyond the scope of our time here to dig into too deeply into the causes of humanity's break from nature. But it's really fun around the campfire conversation, a conversation I actually had around a campfire the last week with some of the folks in the hall today, to think about how we got to this place. What were those root drivers? Was it the invention of capitalism, or was it really the invention of agriculture that got us on the wrong path? Or going way back, was it the invention of language that allowed early humans to hunt cooperatively, to begin to kill other large mammals and have that break from primal unity? That's fun to think about. I really like to have that conversation around the campfire, but it's beyond our scope to delve into today. What we can say is that language, which we should note is also a very recent invention, relatively recent invention in human history. Language is powerful. Language powerfully shapes the way we see the world. Language is the foundation of this industrial worldview that we're discussing this weekend, that worldview that seeks to commodify every part of nature's richness and bounty, to bend the earth to our will, to garden it for our purposes. The lexicon of techno-industrial growth culture supports that process of assimilation. Now, it's common sense, of course, to understand that our linguistic patterns shape our cognitive frames. And there are genuine bona fide scholars on this panel and others to come who are better suited to dissect this. But as a simple-minded sort, as a non-academic, a simple lover of wilderness and wildlife, that is, wilderness, self-willed lands, not bent or yoked to human will, and self-willed creatures who call those places home. And as a practicing on-the-ground conservationist with the Northeast Wilderness Trust, I can tell you it drives me nuts. It drives me crazy to hear how so many colleagues and friends in our own community in the conservation and environmental movements have so unthinkingly adopted the language of resourcism, of possession of the earth. Now, we expect to hear the language of dominion from the enemies of nature, from the PR flacks of the corporations, from the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, from the ad agencies who are the hired guns for every destructive form of technology. It's no surprise when the manufacturer of an all-terrain vehicle tells us, don't just hit the trail, pound it mercilessly. And that's real ad copy, which, not incidentally, is actually really quite good. It's a very pithy ad copy. It's morally repugnant, but it's good. But that doesn't bother me so much as it does to hear how our own community speaks of humanity's relationship to the earth. So how about this ad from the Nature Conservancy recently in Time magazine, right there by the pharmaceutical ads, which hopefully informs us that nature cleans our air. Well, isn't that really nice of Mother Nature, you know, here framed for us as a sort of planetary cleaning lady, cleaning up after those messy humans, tidying up our air. Our air, note that possessive, you know that air belongs to us, of course. And this is just one of a series of ads that the Nature Conservancy has been running to communicate the so-called array of ecosystem services that nature provides to humanity. Now, it's true, certainly, that humanity depends utterly upon nature's diversity and ecological functioning. Promoting conservation as primarily not about preventing extinction, human-caused extinction, but primarily about sustaining ecosystem services is this fundamentally anthropocentric frame. It's implicit in the term even. It's those ecosystems out there serve us. Or consider this example here of the kind of language that everyone in the hall would have seen from either an environmental group or a greenwashing corporation. Our environment's precious. Good stewardship of natural resources is key to sustaining a healthy working landscape. So let's unpack this one a bit. Okay, there we have the possessive again. You know, the world is ours. It's not the community of life to which we belong, but it's the backdrop to human history. It's just the stuff around us, an environment. But even used as that sort of shorthand moniker for the totality of organic and inorganic elements of the ecosphere, the environment, like the economy, is an abstraction. It helps distance us from reality, from caring about real places, real forests or wetlands or grasslands, the home to real creatures that are being destroyed by the expanding technosphere. The environment, of course, in this kind of framing is just a collection of what? Of natural resources that we are free to exploit, perhaps gently, if we want to use good stewardship. So the phrase natural resources, of course, commodifies the living earth, again, in an anthropocentric frame. And as for stewardship, which is a perfectly awful word, look up the etymology. Look it up. The steward comes from the sty ward, the ward of the sty, the ward of the hogs, out behind the thatch-covered hovel. So stewardship, whether practiced either kindly or rapaciously, means domestication and management. And domestication also is implicit and framed positively in this working landscape phrase, which of course trickled down from industrial forest clear-cutters who started celebrating the so-called working forest, and now is widely used by people who should know better and who think of themselves as environmentalists. So to confront anthropocentrism This worldview of supposed human exceptionalism that makes humanity's thoughtless appropriation or even enslavement of the world seem perfectly natural and normal to us. We must confront also the language of dominion, and that begins at home with all of us. So I would challenge you to keep a watchful eye out for these and other pernicious terms that support a resourcist relationship to the earth and which convey that managerial mindset. And once you start looking for them, I guarantee you will see them everywhere. Look for them, highlight them, note them, and renounce them. Renounce them. Let all of us who imagine a future world of beauty and diversity begin to use a rhetoric of reciprocity, the language of love when speaking of the wild earth. Not an environment, not a garden to be managed, but a wild community of life, a living membership, our one and only home. Thank you.
Thank you. Marian Eldritch, I'd like to bring, I'm just wowed by that right now. I almost don't even have words. The possessive. Like, I haven't thought of that, and that is so true. Now that I'm thinking, you totally see that everywhere. I'm just, my mind. And I'm not the only one. If we look at the chat, that's what I'd like to bring your attention to, the chat. Oh my goodness. So if Eldritch and Mary, if you could just take a look at that and maybe answer some questions if you'd like to do that now, or however you'd like to direct Q&A at the moment. But there's a lot of great stuff in the chat right now. Thanks.
That's great. Yeah, and Ebony, that's that shift of paradigm is so important for us. So yeah, let's look at the chat and open a conversation here for a bit. One is Diana saying that it's a great revelation and shift of paradigm to see what we've done to our siblings, to our Mother Earth. That was my response to Diana. And Diana, would you like to talk about your comment? You said we are the disgusting species we don't need to be. What moved you in that phrase?
Yes, I mean, I would like to think that there are quite a few fellow humans out there who would also experience a revelation, but they have no idea, and they see it in this excellent presentation. Other humans, they grew up with this notion. It's just, so did many of us, I'm sure. It's like a fish in water. It's normal. The idea that, you know, we own property, we possess this and that. The thing is how to get that shifted, especially in the face of prevailing attitudes now. And just we are a very entitled feeling species. Let me see, what did I address? Let me bring up the chat again.
Yeah, you just had a great phrase that struck a lot of us, that we are the disgusting species we don't need to be. I think you must have been moved by the images that was in the video.
I mean, we know this stuff goes on. And by the way, this is a very sad commentary. Do you recall the image? One of the images he used was that of an emaciated child with a vulture in the background.
Yes.
I don't know if it's the same photograph, but many years ago, I read an article about this. The photographer took that. He was on assignment, and it was so unbearable for him. He saw that scene. It was a vulture waiting for the child to die. And the photographer just couldn't stand it anymore, and he died by suicide. So some humans can't even stand what we have wrought, which is sad. He took that route instead of channeling his feelings.
Diana, thank you.
Story I know behind that image.
Thank you for bringing that forward. Let's see, Dallin and Robin, you had some comments.
Actually, before you go, I just want to make a super quick comment.
Sure.
Diana, thank you for that. And I think, I sometimes can't believe we are actually in the process of throwing 4+ billion years of evolution and just flushing it down the toilet. I mean, we are just, kissing it all goodbye. We're on track, I think, for 3 or 4 degrees Celsius by 2100 by most estimates. And so I share your disgust. What helps me is to focus on me, not other people. Me and the immediate circle of people I talk to who already agree with me, like all of you. And let's get us shifted around and not worry about the climate deniers, is what I would have found helpful. And also, it helps me to realize, wait, this is coming from wounding. It's not that we're disgusting, horrible, bad people. We're wounded. And we need to heal. From the shamanic view, we need to heal our relationship with the rest of the living world, with the rest of our kin. And if we can just start doing that, I think we'll be in good shape. And I noticed Patricia Robin Woodruff posted Robin Wall Kimmerer braiding sweetgrass. Yes, I have a link to one of her clips, which is exquisite, in the PDF handout you'll get. And I've also just posted her 10 rules for honorable harvest, the teachings of grass. So I love Robin too. Thank you, Patricia, for pointing that out. I'm sorry. And then Eldritch, what were you?
Oh, that's fine. I was just inviting Robin to, Robin, would you like to say more? And then Dallin?
It's difficult to change like someone how they're thinking. That's why I was thinking, like, okay, if you at least make them understand that it's useful to them, then perhaps they'll take care of it. Because if I were to say to someone, like, the birds are our siblings, they'd be like, well, she's a bit of a kook, and not take me, not listen to me. We have on the edge of our property, we have a vulture population and a medical center built. Well, they came in and they cut and they cut and they cut and they cut all the way back to the property line. And then they built the medical center. So the vultures, because of the wind currents, always go off that direction. So now they're frustrated because the vultures are, pooping on their cars and pulling the trim off and things like that. And it's like, well, what did you expect? This is their route. And yet to they've spent $1 million on the center. They're not going to undo it. So like, how do you even communicate with them when they don't have that thinking?
It seems like, and maybe Mary, you could comment on this, that, by law, we've started to implement environmental studies, but I don't know that environmental studies really thinks shamanically or thinks in terms of the whole biosphere.
Yeah, I think this really is we'll get to solutions in a little bit, but I've divided the solutions into 3 categories. Legal and legislative changes, like the rights of nature, getting ordinances like that in, and personal behavioral changes, our own lifestyles, like me ditching shampoos, which came in very handy, by the way, during COVID. I didn't have to go buy stock off on shampoo or anything. All I need is water. So legal and legislative, personal behavioral changes, and mindset changes. And I put the mindset changes first because I think watching our own mind and how we talk about it and to other people makes a difference. Even if they look at me like I'm a kook, I've just been doing this so long, I've gotten over it. It's like, yeah, somebody says kook, I go, yeah, somebody called me. Where's the freak in the room? It's like, oh, you want me?
Well, I went down to talk to them, and they actually have Department of Land and Resources or something like that coming in to shoot off firecrackers, to scare away the vultures, to not be there. And I'm like, well, the environmental guys are supposed to be on my side.
Right.
But that's part of that mindset of this is our Earth. And if we like a species, like our cats and dogs or the birds, the small ones, they get to stay. And if we don't like them, grizzly bear or vulture or whatever, we have the right to slaughter them.
Mhm.
And we can destroy the bison on the American plains to put in our cattle. You know, we can, you know, it's our planet, right? What are you talking about, Robin?
Yeah, and
It's all about us, right?
keeping the vultures off of our property in this example, right? Great. Hey, Dallin, you had a couple questions for us. Would you bring them forward?
Well, I kind of look at this predicament that we're in as like our relationship with nature, and we've created all these problems that have affected nature. My questions are: should we not be the ones to fix these problems, since we're the ones that created them? And I feel that it's not nature's responsibility to teach us what we're doing is wrong, because nature is the one that's being abused in this relationship. So nature shouldn't have to correct us. We should be the ones that are doing the work.
Dallin, in terms of nature having to connect us, I don't know if you has everyone here seen that that joke that's been going around the internet about some of the deities talking to Mother Nature and saying, "Hey, did you see that those humans are not paying attention to you, Mother Nature?" And Mother Nature says, "What? They're not listening?" And they're like, "No, they're doing worse. They're destroying the forests and the water." She says, "They've been doing that for years." "Well, they're doing it more and on steroids." And Mother Nature says, "Hold my beer," and unleashes COVID to make us all stop and think and go to our rooms and stay in our rooms till we figure out something different.
You know, go ahead, Dylan or Dallin.
Yeah, Dallin. But my point is, like, if this is a behavior that we are engaged in, what I've learned is, if you want to change someone's behavior, you have to change it internally, not from an external source, in order for that change to stick.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of where I was going with that.
Right.
I just have a couple of quick points. I've stopped saying our relationship with nature, or even just nature. I talk about the rest of nature, because when we talk about our relationship with nature as opposed to our relationship with the rest of nature, we're once again speaking of ourselves as though we are outside of nature, and we're not. And that's that's why we need the biosphere to be alive, is because we're not separate. As the biosphere goes, so go we. So I want to invite us to think about, just play with it, and how, when you talk about nature versus the rest of nature, does it make any difference to you? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but what is it doing to your mind, if anything? And just noticing and being very gentle and loving with ourselves, and just noticing. And one of the speakers that I've studied this extensively, actually, and one of the speakers says, we don't know how to fix it. And part of the Anthropocene is believing that we can fix it. Part of believing that we're the center of it means we think we can fix it. And we know, you know, Eldritch talks a lot about biomimicry. We know a lot about the great interdependent web of existence, but there's so much we don't understand and don't know. And a lot of times when we try to even plant trees, if you plant the wrong tree in the wrong place or at the wrong time, it can actually interfere with the biosphere. There's so much we don't know. So I think we have to clean up our mess. You know, Mom always said, clean up your mess. If you make a mess, clean it up. But in terms of how to fix it, I think we need to do what we can. I'm totally with you, but with an awareness and a humility that we don't know what we're doing really. And we can get things started, but we then need to leave it alone and let nature, the rest of nature, sort it out. So just something to think about. You'll have a lot of resources on the PDF we're sending, and feel free to play with them and let me know what you come up with, because I would love the answer to that too.
Other thoughts? I'm curious to hear from people maybe who didn't put something in the chat, but may have been stirred by this discussion. I was interested in that term called greenwashing. Is that the first time you've encountered the term greenwashing?
I've heard it before.
Mm-hmm. In what context did you hear it?
For example, corporations can do it. I can't think of specific examples, but corporations might try to do that with a mind of saying how much we're an environmental corporation, we use 100% wind, and we forget that all these entities have a heavy footprint. They're bound to have a footprint, as does each of us humans, you know. Of course, every creature has a footprint. That does not make us wrong or bad or misplaced. It's how we manage it. I do want to remind everybody, it would seem, speaking of footprints, the topic of overpopulation is often a taboo topic. People are not talking about that. So like it's a no-no to even suggest that there are too many humans. And another form, you could almost call it greenwashing. It's like, well, we can handle many more humans. It's a matter of how humans use the resources, you know. So even if it is possible, it's still the loss of shared space and the intensification of demand by humans on our shared spaces. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And
Part of the problem is our technology has allowed us to bypass the natural checks and balances that the biosphere has on us. And we're way beyond the carrying capacity, what's called the carrying capacity, if you look that up, of the planet. Our numbers have got to decline. And shamanically, a virus, one of its functions is to cull overpopulated species where they're densely concentrated so it can spread quickly. It's one of their jobs. Anyway, Ebony, you were going to say something? And I'd also like to hear from some of the rest of you who haven't spoken up yet.
yeah, when I heard greenwashing, just in the context that I live every day, I'm a Black female in this world, and as I mentioned in the very beginning before we started, we were just talking about the George Floyd case, and that there was a guilty on all counts verdict that we were just celebrating, but knowing that that's a war that's a battle that's been won, but the war is still ongoing. So in that context, when I hear greenwashing, I think whitewashing, which is something that I experience when in my everyday life. So there's a show that's on Netflix now called The Magic School Bus. It was a show that was on many, many years ago. And in the new version, the two Black characters look like they're mixed race instead of all Black. Their skin is like 5 times lighter than it was. Their hair isn't as kinky anymore. And then the bus driver, who was an older white woman, they made her younger. So she's not even older anymore. So what's wrong with aging, and what's wrong with being darker skinned? So they just completely whitewashed some of the diversity from there. And that's really disappointing. But whitewashing is another way of certain groups showcasing their privilege. So when I see greenwashing, I think about the privilege that humans are pushing on other species and in our planet, and because they have the power, they have the upper hand. At least many think they do. But then when COVID comes, they wonder, well, what's going on, you know? So I think that, Mary, when you were talking about the humbling and the humility, I think that's really important because so many people have been humbled by COVID. And I think some may not want to think of it as Mother Nature coming back and doing her thing. I know I'm a pesco vegetarian, so that's vegetarian plus seafood. And I know when I speak to others about that, sometimes the conversation gets really tense because uh, people don't want to know. I mean, before I was a pesco vegetarian, I didn't want to know about the harm that I was causing to the earth and to my own body. And it was just easier not to think or acknowledge those things. But that didn't mean that it wasn't hurting other people and the planet. And that's the same thing I see with greenwashing. So whitewashing, greenwashing, privilege, it's all about that superiority, the privilege of the power, abusing others for their own benefit. To me, it's connected. And again, that's that interconnectedness that Eldritch, you were talking about. And so I see us do that, not just with racial issues and gender, but here we are doing it with the home that we share with the rest of nature.
I kind of have a question.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking about how do we stay motivated kind of when there's disheartening facts? Like, for example, with recycling, you know, I heard that 10% max is actually recycled. And I feel like that makes a lot of people just want to throw everything away, or, you know, you want to stop eating meat because it's bad. And then you hear 60% of meat's thrown away, and it makes you think maybe I should just eat it because it's trash. So, you know, we make it trash. So how do you stay motivated with these facts that kind of make you think, like, I don't know, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. Go ahead, Mary.
I think what helps me is to think about not the surface, but what's the root cause? Like, the recycling industry itself is crashing. So even if we were recycling everything, it would just continue to crash. Recycling is not the answer. So what causes all those products is a lot of single-use items and packaged items. So can I buy more bulk, taking my own container? I can even do that now. I'm in Tacoma Park, so I've got a little shop called the Fulfillery in addition. But even Mom's, I think, has where you can take your own container to get your dish detergent and using less detergent. I love all the beautiful soap, but the more soap I use, not only the more does it harm the pipes, but the more I have to rinse to get the soap off. So the more water I have to use, and just simplify. Find what is the root of the problem, not the surface. We need to recycle more, but how do we recycle less by having less to recycle? That's the kind of question that I find helpful. And I invite you to just play with it and see what comforts you, what reassures you and feels meaningful to you. And believe me, that PDF handout is going to have a lot of ideas for you that you may not have thought of. Part of the problem is that a lot of what we hear about is just mainstream ideas, and we don't hear about those deeper ecology, more radical, meaning going to the root ideas. So I'm hoping that what we've done tonight will help you and feel supportive to you, and that the handout will also help you stay on that journey.
I'd like to add something that I had learned as a child growing up in my household was this poem called I Am One. And later on, I found out that it was written by a Universalist minister. And so I must have been on a UU path a long time ago before I even knew it. But I think this is really helpful in terms of thinking about when we get overwhelmed and that we can't do everything. The poem says, I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. So taking personal responsibility and knowing that even one action is important in the world. But you're right, it is easy to get overwhelmed.
Thank you. Yeah, some of us are overwhelmed. That's very inspiring, by the way. It's kind of comforting too. Some of us are called to act against this monstrous project called the maglev, and the more I hear about it, the more disastrous it is. So I guess that's sort of, there are these threats that force us to come out of ourselves and invest a lot of energy into fighting things like that, really bad ideas. And anyway, can you address that? Can you talk about that?
I can, if you like. This might be good time to move into legal and legislative changes and solutions, because I hear people asking about solutions.
Let's talk about that.
one of in the handout, there's quite a bit of information about a movement called the Rights of Nature. It's actually been around for, I don't know, 10, 20 years and is gaining momentum. It's in, I think, about 36 cities. I'm working to get it introduced here in the city of Tacoma Park. Because like you, I'm exhausted from all the environmental protection campaigns. And even under Obama, how many times did I say, okay, we've got to write to him again about the XL pipeline. And and I'm just like, oh, really? Are you kidding? And maglev, pesticides. I mean, corporations have more staff working to destroy life on Earth and rewrite zoning laws than you and I collectively have the time and energy to defend against while we're trying to live our lives. So we need rights of nature ordinances and similar things because we're exhausted, and our environmental laws simply regulate pollution. They don't really give us the tools we need to truly change this whole cycle. And it basically says that the people have the right to clean air and clean water and healthy land, and the people have a right, have standing, legal standing, to challenge threats to clean air, clean water, and so on. And the river, Sligo Creek, has a right to exist, thrive, and evolve, free of pollution. The land has rights. So there's a declaration of rights both for our kin and for the people to protect our kin. And it's making a difference in all around these cities. They're actually having successes, and there's not a whole lot corporate interest can do. And many American Indian tribes readily adopted this. You know, you talk to white people about it, and not just white people, but most of us, and they go, what? Nature has rights? Does nature get to vote? What does that mean? And they just kind of can't handle it. But you say any of this to an American Indian, and they're like, you get it. Give me that piece of paper. How do we get that? Let's get this through. Come on, let's go. We're ready to rock and roll. What are we waiting for? This is what, yes. I mean, they're all over it. And then the next thing you know, they're signing a grizzly bear treaty. I mean, and a wild rice treaty, the rights of wild rice treaty. So I think we just need to talk about it and look for solutions that will actually get to the heart of what's driving us crazy, instead of spinning our wheels with the environmental laws, the regulatory system we have, because it's designed to fail. Yes, didn't a tribe save the rainforest with giving rights to the land or river? I think Ecuador and Bolivia now have in their national constitution a rights of nature, and they're using it. Oh yeah, I think Ecuador was the first in 2008, so we can catch up. But there's a lot we can do. What I want to do is leave you with hope and with resources to learn more, and that's what that PDF you'll be getting is about. Look up for the rights of nature stuff and contact me. I'm wanting to make it happen here.
Mary, if I just may say, when you talked about the thing that's in my mind right now is in America, in the United States, you mentioned Ecuador and some other countries that give rights to the land, but in the United States, we think, what? That's so weird. Like, it doesn't make sense. Yet we will give rights to corporations.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is that about? That double standard. It's okay to have, give rights to corporations when it serves us, but we can't give rights to nature. To me, it's not that they don't understand the concept, it's they don't want to do it because they can't make money off of it. It's like natural cures. Some natural cures are more effective than prescription drugs, but if you can't make money off of it, we don't want to hear about it. So I love what you just shared, Mary. Thank you.
Yeah, the good news is there really is a lot we can do, but not under the current system. We need to find ways to change it, and we can. And people have already invented it. We can just jump on and sign on and get it in our cities.
Mary, in the chat, I put the 3 things that you had talked about where we go from here. Are the things that we can do, our mindset, things that we can do behaviorally, and things we can do legally. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, just quickly. I think I just covered the legal and legislative changes. I really think it's about a shift from property ownership versus rights-based. the land isn't property to be owned. It's a sovereign being with rights. And so who has rights? The land, the river, the trees, etc. What do they have? This declaration of rights and the remedy, what they will get. If a river, if Sligo Creek is harmed, I would have standing to defend it, even if I'm not directly affected. But the box turtles down there are, and I'm pissed about that. Or a dog that my neighbor is walking can't swim in Sligo Creek because it's too toxic and too polluted. I can sue. And the solution, the money doesn't come to me. The person who's harmed it has to actually restore Sligo Creek so that it's swimmable. So it's really effective, and I'm in love with this, and I'm hoping you'll consider it. And then the personal behavioral changes, we're all on a journey. I've had a really long journey with this. I never would have thought I would live without shampoo. I mean, I just wouldn't have. And that my hair would behave better and be easier. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. I never would have guessed this. So just stay on your own journey. And what's the next step for you? And what's the next right step for Carol Boston might not be for Margaret McClellan or for Robin. There's no right or wrong answer except for what's the next step for you. So look at your own lifestyle. What could you do differently? What are you willing to do differently? And live simply that others may simply live. And then the mindset changes are what we've been talking about. This deep ecology. What could we really be doing differently? Is my own mindset part of the problem? Have I been contaminated by too much marketing? And the invitation is to give up our dominion over the rest of our fellow creatures.
Mhm.
And it's false power. It doesn't contribute to their thriving or ours. And so let's let it go. And that's kind of my wrap up on that. What other ideas do people have?
Mary, I like the concept that you talked about, changing our language, because that helps us change our mindset and helps us with that shift of paradigm. Sometimes the shift of paradigm is the thing that gives us a headache, but sometimes we need it. We need a shift of paradigm. We're getting close to closing out. So are there other thoughts? There have been some great quotes here, and we will collect them and put them in the notes for this class. Carol?
Oh, I was just thinking, I was glad to hear about the dominion, the rights on behalf of other species, because I remember several years ago, the New York Times wrote an article about it may be that people are going to have to decide if we want to live in a world with elephants, right? Elephants can't decide that. All of our decisions are making that decision for them. So I always, when we talk about being equal species, it is true. And yet we're the only ones who can fix this mess. I mean, the elephants can't fix their own situation. So I worry that too much reminder that we're all equal species takes a little bit of the burden off us for the fixing that is only ours to do because of our hands and our brains and whatever else, because we messed it up.
Right. Margaret put in the chat the rights of nature, the link to the laws in Ecuador.
Great.
Any other thoughts as we're getting ready to close out?
Just, I hope there's a lot of good information that's been gleaned and shared here. Will it be saved, or will the PDF that you were handing out include?
We will. I talked with Ebony earlier. We'll copy off the chat and we'll reformat it so that we pull out just the quotes and the links. And then Ebony has a in a minute, Ebony will talk about next steps, but we'll provide an information sheet that sums up this class.
Great.
Any other thoughts that are on people's minds and hearts?
Well, we're already doing something by having the class.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. You've expanded my thinking, and I'm going to have to really sit with what I've heard tonight to, to really change my mindset. I just really appreciate everything that I've heard and everything that I've read in the chat. Thank you, everybody.
Yes. Thank you.
Eldridge, are you ready for me?
See, I think, Mary, do you want to close out this section before we move on to Ebony? I think you had a quote and a poem to sum us up.
Yes, and I just want to remind everybody as I drink this sip of water, this water, just as any water you're drinking, has been through the whole hydrological cycle and has been in the clouds and in the earth, and it's just been everywhere. And it connects us to life itself and to all other beings. All beings drink water, you know? So every time you take a sip of water, you can thank the water for connecting you powerfully with the rest of all your kin. And take that as a blessing. And I want to close with a quote from Terry Tempest Williams, who's a wonderful speaker. And she says, "The eyes of the future are looking back at us, and they are praying for us to see beyond our own time. They are kneeling with hands clasped that we might act with restraint, that we might leave room for the life that is destined to come. To protect what is wild is to protect what is gentle. And perhaps the wilderness we fear is the pause between our own heartbeats, the silent space that says, we live only by grace. Wilderness lives by this same grace. Wild mercy is in our hands." And the poem is a rewilding spell by a Wiccan friend of mine named Patty Stovall. And I've changed just the first 2 lines. I'm hoping she won't mind too much. And it's a nice kind of closing invocation before Ebony shares some more. Bring forth this planet to the place where all our kin share sacred space. Bring back the plants and wildlife too, the web restored, long overdue. Fresh air, clean water, fertile earth, we celebrate this grand rebirth. By wind and fire, earth and sea, and by my will, so mote it be.
So mote it be. So let's take a moment and take a breath and just honor all the things that we've heard tonight. Take a breath in and out and know the air that is around us. Think of the warmth of your blood and the heat and the fire that is a part of our life. Knowing the earth that is not only rocks and things that look solid and foundational, but alive, actually alive. And know that we're all a part of the earth, the air, the fire, and the water. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Ebony? Oh, Ebony, I think I should, with that, extinguish the chalice for tonight. I'm really appreciative of the time we've had together.
Thank you.
Here we are. I have my 2 screens going up and
right.
doing funny stuff. So yeah, thank you so much, Eldritch and Mary. I'm going to share with you that on Saturday, May 15th at 10 a.m. to 11:30, we have our next adult faith development class, How to Pray, Rediscovering Prayer from a UU Perspective. So we hope that you'll join us then. And you can register the same way you registered for this class, and would love to see you there. And so you notice it's a different time. It's on a Saturday. So some folks who may not be able to get to classes during the week, they have this option here. So would love to see everybody there as well. And now Mary and Eldritch will play a song for us in closing.
And we can chat.
And reap the seeds of change alive from deep within thee. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Everyone, thank you so much for being here and sharing your time with us, and having this, being a part of this space that we made today, this sacred space to learn about Earth stewards and what that really means to each of us. And what works for me may not work for someone else, and vice versa. So understanding our own meaning, finding our own truth, and acting upon that. So Eric Eldritch, Mary Rooker, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us today. We will appreciate it. It's a lot to think about. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening. Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Ebony.
Welcome.
Good night, Victor, Maria, Dallin, Robin, Dylan, great to meet you.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah, thanks to all who shared.
Margaret, you're everywhere. So great to see you. And Trisha.
Thank you.
Also, Dallin, I think you had asked for the no poo method, the how to ditch shampoo. I've got a handout, a separate handout on that. Don't worry.
Lori has a handout for everything, pixels for every situation.
Sweet.